My name is Erin Olson, and I'm the owner of PC Keys Technology Solutions, a computer training company. I have a master's in education and am a Microsoft certified trainer as well as a Microsoft Office Specialist Master Instructor. Now, I know that sounds like a lot of credentials, but the important question is, why do I get so excited to teach an Excel Essentials course after more than 16 years of training? Well, there are actually two main reasons, I suppose. First is that Excel is such a rich and versatile application that every time I teach it to a new audience, we discuss different ways to use it for different types of data and different things that we want to capture, store, and communicate, each requiring somewhat unique applications of even the most common core skills. That means it never gets boring. There's always something new, or at least a variety of ways in which we can work with Excel. The second reason I still enjoy Excel is because Excel actually brings a little bit of fear to at least a little bit of people. Maybe even a little bit of apprehension, if not full fear. But that's not really why I enjoy it. What I like to do, though, is to be able to break this application down into simple core concepts and practices, so that even what seems like it might be really complicated is just as easy as something that seems really simple. That's what we're going to do in this series. We're going to go from start to finish, including creating worksheets, configuring workbooks, entering data, understanding formulas and functions, applying regular, custom, and conditional formatting, creating charts, using tables, and more. By the end of the series, you'll be ready and able to take on Excel projects with confidence, not fear or apprehension. You'll understand how every cell and function works. You'll be able to work with Excel regardless of the specific type of data that you use. You'll be able to do so efficiently and accurately, and those are really important to me, and I think they will be to you as well. Whether you're a brand new Excel user, one who has used it without any formal training, or you're one who has used older versions and want to know all the latest greatest stuff in this version. Total Training's Microsoft Office Excel 2010 Essentials is exactly where you need to be. So, if you're ready, let's get started exploring the wonders of working with worksheets. Like almost anywhere else we go or anything else we do, it usually pays over and over again if we get familiar with our surroundings and comfortable with what things we have to work with before we actually venture out. Excel is no different. In fact, in this application, more than probably all of the others in the Office suite, it's beneficial to understand exactly what we have so that we know the possibility and the potential before we even begin. That way, all of our insecurities are handled and we can get right down to business, regardless of what that actual business may be. Well, now, I like to give you a little credit, and maybe I will admit that all of your insecurities aren't going to go away with this little introduction, but we'll have a good start on getting you comfortable and settled in. So let's go ahead and do that. And in order to do so, I'm going to actually open up a file that's already been created from my Project Files folder. This is sitting on the desktop, so I'll give that a double click. I'll double click Chapter 1, and then I'll double click the Excel 2010 sample file. That, of course, is going to launch the file by opening Excel as well. What we have here are just several examples of different types of data, different types of formatting, and different tools that we can use as we get comfortable and familiar with Excel. I actually want you to start thinking about several things. I want you to think about what types of things you can do with spreadsheets, as well as what kind of data you can use and how it can be presented using Excel, and how Excel is going to help facilitate this. Excel is not intended to be just one more thing that we have to deal with. It's intended to help us get more efficient with whatever it is that we have to accomplish. So let's take a look at this first one. The first one is actually very simple. It's simply a way to use Excel to hold very straightforward data like what we would find in a simple list. Could be a contact sheet, could be an attendance roster, maybe our family's names, phone numbers, birthdays, maybe even an inventory list, or maybe it's your CD collection of all the music you love. There's nothing really that has to tie it down to anything specific. A list could be about anything we want. The important thing to recognize, though, is the way it's organized. That's why Excel becomes beneficial in this case. The first thing we notice is that Excel organizes things into rows and columns. Columns going up and down, and of course rows going across. So in a very general sense, we often put what should be fields like last name, first name, phone number, or birthday going down a column, and then a row represents a record, so we can have a record for a certain person in this case. I'm not really using any of the functionality of Excel other than just entering data, but this is often much simpler and more efficient, quicker to set up especially, and easier for us to use than it would be, say, to try to put this into a table in Microsoft Word or to format in a word processor using tabs. Even though this is really easy and a really simple example of what Excel can do, I want you to know that there's nothing wrong with using Excel this way. We don't always want to use all of the advanced features of a product, and sometimes just doing the simple stuff is really all right. So although it's basic, it's still a good and very common choice. We see this probably as the most common things that people do, even if they don't know anything else about Excel. But of course, we do want to know more about what Excel can do. So I'm going to move down to the bottom of the screen, and I'm going to click on the little tab called Budget. This brings us to our second example, and this of course is a little bit more exciting than that plain list was. First of all, it has different kinds of colors and angled text and all of that, but let's talk about the data first. This particular worksheet is showing us all kinds of data entry. It shows us that we can have text, for example, all of these labels for the different types of items in our budget. Of course, we have all kinds of numerical entries, all of the stuff in the middle about our expenses. And on the right-hand side in the bottom, we even see things like calculations. Where we didn't hand type these in, this is something that Excel calculated for us. We have average payments. All the way over on the right, we also have the total number of payments made in a year. And even at the bottom, we can see some different calculations related to the income that we had, the net income after expenses, and then something called our savings goal. I want you to look very carefully at the savings goals. You will notice that many of them have some different things going on. For example, some of them have a star, and some of them have a red flag. Some of them have dollar values. One of them has borrow in red. And if we go all the way over to the right, it actually says none. This is something called conditional formatting, where if I'm meeting my savings goal that I've set up for myself, I get a little visual star to make me feel good about it. And if I'm not saving as much as my goal, then I'm going to see the red flag. This is yet another example of how the tools in Excel can help us easily identify and understand our data, as opposed to just looking at a whole bunch of numbers that start to swim around in our head. So there's a lot of stuff going on in this particular worksheet, but it's a very common use. Budgets may be one of the most common uses for Excel, whether it's for a personal use or even high-end business. In addition to the conditional formatting, we also of course know that there are calculations here, formulas and functions, and we'll spend a lot of time throughout this course talking about each one of these components. Our last example of data comes from the Sales tab, so we will go ahead and give that one a click. And I know this one doesn't look quite as exciting as our budget did, but really it's a different way of looking at data. This actually looks very simple because it's very, shall we say, consistent. We have labels all the way across the top, followed by a bunch of records, and there's not a lot of shading and calculations and those types of things going on. What makes this different is that this is actually a table. The first thing we notice is that it has wonderful formatting. It has the alternating lines so that we can see that some of them are shaded and the next one isn't. That makes it very easy with lots of data to keep track of which record you're looking at. You may also have noticed our little drop downs at the top. We're not going to take a look at how these work now, but we will later. They're actually all about filtering. So if I have a lot of records and I say I don't want to see everybody right now, maybe I only want to see people from the Eastern region or things that were sold by Susan, a table allows me to do that very quickly. If I move over just a little bit to the right, and I'm going to go ahead and scroll a little so you can see this as well, we actually have a totals column. This, of course, is a calculation, just like we saw calculations in our budget. There's a couple of things over to the right, which is technically outside of the table. And if we scroll down, a table also gives us the ability to see totals at the bottom. These particular totals were created all using the table. And honestly, all of this was pretty much set up with only about 4 or 5 clicks. The power of tables isn't just calling it a table, it's the features that it makes available to us, which we'll talk about in the chapter on tables. As we'll learn, it's really simple to learn what kinds of data you can put onto a worksheet and to actually put it on the worksheet. Then all we have to know is that the sky is the limit with what you're going to do with that data, and that's where Excel gets really exciting. Tables is just one of the options that we'll discuss. The thing I saved for last is talking about something I like to call output. I can have all of this data I want, but sometimes people will look at this and their head will just start to swim. In this particular example, we only have 50 records. That's not too bad. But what if I had 50,000 records or 1,000,000 records? Then trying to look at that and make sense of it would be very difficult. So the last tab that I'm going to click on is actually about a chart. And charts are one of the very powerful tools that Excel offers to help us explain and understand our data. Charts, of course, are based off of our data in lists and tables like we've seen, but it is a chart and it's very visual. As you probably know, it can be very confusing to see just a bunch of numbers like I've said, so this makes a whole lot more sense. We did not take a lot of time to look at our budget, but without having to look at that entire budget, we can look at this 2010 January through June utility expenses chart and very easily compare the expenses one to the other. Because they're also grouped, for example, the first group talks about the power expense, the second one about water, and so forth, we can also compare one expense to the other, as well as to expenses across the board. One of the keys to making data understandable is making it understandable in a certain context. I can do all kinds of things with a budget, and maybe for this particular presentation, I want people to be able to see that this is my grouping of all of our power expenses, and maybe I'm going to compare one month to the other. That may not be what I want to get out of the chart the next time, so I might have several different versions, several different charts based off of the same data to try to communicate different messages. Therein lies the power of working with the data in Excel, and especially with charts. So our number one goal with Excel is to take data that may be ambiguous or even seem useless until we put it into context so we can understand and interpret it in ways that make sense to us, especially for a specific purpose or to communicate a specific message. We can do that through simple organization, performing a variety of calculations, and even making charts so we can more easily visualize what the data means. In the chapter on charting, we're going to learn how to create phenomenal and impressive charts like this one using all kinds of options, but I'm also going to show you how you can create a chart like this one that probably is what, I'd say 85 to 90% or more of you really want with only one click. Yes, I said one click. Charts can be simple. Just like everything else in Excel, if you don't make it too complicated, things can be simple. So our first example was just a way to work with text in a different way, something that was a little bit more simple than a word processor. Our other examples extend that to be the true features of what Excel can do, like calculations and sorting and filtering. All of them can be applied to what you need to do, whether you're a student, a teacher, a business owner, an employee, even a researcher, or anything else. When you ask yourself, when do I use Excel? Hopefully this will give you a little bit of help. The answer is anytime you want to quickly structure data and or use functionality like sorting, filtering, and calculations, or make a visual representation out of numeric data that's going to help you understand your data better, as well as others understand what you're trying to get them to understand from your data. That's our underlying theme. Take a bunch of data, turn it into useful information, no matter how simple or complex that process may seem to be. Excel will help us do that much faster and much more accurately than we could with virtually any other tool that's available to us.